What do you think will be the first software jobs to be replaced by AI?
Yeah, that's now we're getting into the speculative part, right?
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
like, where is this going, right? Um, I mean, I always think about in terms of like the potential that I think in terms of how much AI can help is also different in different areas of software, right? Like to
Hmm.
take a simple example, backend versus web frontend, right? When we write backend code, like let's say like a relatively simple CRUD type HTTP API, right? The patterns how to do that are very well established, right? And I don't know how many times I've written an application with like controller, service, repository, query to the database, right? Large language models are quite good at generating SQL queries as well, right?
Hmm.
So maybe something like that at some point, like to just generate that with an agent and execute it. I can imagine that much more than having an AI by itself do web front end code, because the browser is just like illogical, right?
Hmm.
Like we've been struggling with the browser platform for such a long time. Like it always goes in circles, trying to improve what we're doing, state management, server side, client side, all of that, right? So that's a lot messier, right? Also for us as humans to even describe like what we want to do. So just to give that as an example, I think there's, areas where patterns are a lot more established
Yeah.
than in other areas are probably going to get more powerful AI support sooner rather than the others.
That's interesting. I must admit, I think I probably would have said the other way around, but
Mm.
so I wrote. I'm slightly biased. I wrote some code back in the early 1990s. I was working on a research project, and we were building something that was kind of like a weird forerunner of microservices. They were called cooperative business objects. And we auto-generated user interfaces. We could design an object that
Mm.
represented a concept, and from that, I wrote the code that would just generate a user interface that would work for it.
Mm.
And that seemed it was it was an interesting
Mm.
project and an interesting thing to do.
Mm.
So I was thinking that might be more.
Mm. I
So
mean, in web
it depends.
development work, I always think of like you can this 80-20 thing, right? You often get 80% of the way
Yeah,
in like 20% of the time. And then there are all these like intricate little pitfalls and like connecting things with each other and weird bugs. And so that's why maybe that's my view on the browser. So
yeah. But but it's an interesting problem. That's
mm.
um. So your bet would be on back end services for simple web apps.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, don't name me now, name me down on anything. Like, I know that, I mean, the most impressive demos right now are in the space of low code, right?
Yeah.
Because so that, because low code application platforms are already at a very, very high abstraction level.
Hmm.
So like jumping from like a natural language high level description to what a low code platform can do is actually like a relatively short kind of way. But then, of course, you also have a low code application with all of the constraints, like the lack of control that it only
Yeah.
maybe works for certain kinds of domains, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe even like the ones where you already don't have to do much as a developer are also going to be the ones where AI can take even more work away from you. Whereas the ones where developers today have to spend a lot of work,
Yeah.
uh, conversely, then you actually get a lot less out of it today.
So So technically intricate things in obscure problem domains are probably the safer jobs for now.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're
Yeah.
saying.
And also as developers, like it's definitely going in the direction of just focusing a lot more on design and
Yeah.
all of those things, and not so much on the syntax and the intricate details of how you plug things together, which could also be seen as a positive development, right? Because
Yeah.
that's also sometimes the more interesting part
Well,
of the work.
that seems to me like the short term promise. I assume that one day um, all code will be written by AIs unless people are doing it for fun.
Hmm.
Any serious production problems will be done by AIs because they'll be better at it than we will. I assume that
Hmm.
comes one day, but in the shorter term, the more immediate, the next big step, it seems to me, is what we've been talking about in terms of being them getting more incremental and being able to evolve solutions. One of my what funnily enough, talking about low code, one of my hesitations with the current generation of AI tools is very similar to my hesitation with low code, is that it doesn't adopt any of the engineering principles that we've learnt over the years. So there's no version control. You can't step back to a stable version of what went before. You can't, even if you version control the prompt of your AI, you're not going to generate the same code the next time.
Yeah.
And so that's not a very solid foundation on which to build the growth of a complex system that's pushing the bounds of the capability of the system, whether that's a human or a machine.
Yeah, that's also why I think like AI by its or I should say a large language model by itself will not get us there, right? So it's a combination of things. Maybe it's even like an evolution of of the algorithms, and also I think, I mean, I'm also, even though I'm in this space like now so much at the moment, right? I'm having a hard time like speculating and imagining, right? Because I also think that if we want to get there, it will also be with architecture and technical approaches that are different from how we're building things today, right? So we have to kind of step out of the box and think about, a future where there's not a Spring application in the back end and a JavaScript application in the front end, but maybe in 10, 15 years, will things maybe look different? So because we've like come up with new architecture patterns, new design patterns that actually help us leverage AI better, so we can reduce the amount of work that we have to put into it as humans, right? And that's a lot harder to imagine when you've been doing things a certain way for 20 or 30 years, right?
Yeah, but that's part. So I mean, that important step, it seems to me, that we're both, I think, envisaging is a really interesting one in terms of moving us forward, because it's that step of them being smart enough to be able to try something out and change things incrementally and evaluate their solutions to understand where to go next. It's this model of, at that point they are becoming automated engineers rather than just automated code generators. That's a very different kind of thing and a very different set of problems to solve. Problem solving being one of those problems. So, applying those sorts of those more disciplined approaches to doing things seems to me they must do that at some point, however smart they are.
I mean, there's and that was also the discussion around Devon that we were talking about before, that makes a plan for how to implement things. And the company behind Devon says that they're focusing on reasoning, right? And I mean, again, I'm not a data scientist, so I'm always a bit confused. But there's this like way of describing, to a certain level, large language models can do some form of like quote unquote again reasoning, right? I think not technically, but they have this emergent property where they can do something that looks like reasoning to a certain extent, but it's not really reasoning. It's just almost like a coincidence. Right? So there's probably better AI, better approaches to AI that will be able to do that better, and maybe large language models can never quite get there. But there's definitely also, it seems like there's a lot of research into looking into like how can you, certain models are a lot better at it than others. GPT-4 is, as far as I know, still one of the best ones at doing this type of thing, like reasoning about what questions should I ask the user about the user story. That's like a form of reasoning, like what information are we still missing, right? So if we can get that up, or have different AI that can do that, that's, like you said, that's definitely one of the key things.
And I'm riding another of my hobby horses now, but I think that the deving thing, if they're looking about making it build a plan, I think that's a mistake. I've just made a video about kneffing, so the difference between complex systems, complex adaptive systems, and complicated systems. And I believe software development is always a complex adaptive system. And so what we should be doing is we should be working experimentally. So if the AI is going to take over from us or really raise that level of abstraction to the degree where, you know, we're just giving it what we want it to do and it does all the technicalities of building the software, then it's got to be able to do that kind of thing. It's got to be able to design experiments to carry out as part of the way to make progress, because that's what you do in a complex adaptive system. It's what works, and that's really what I mean. So when I talk about engineering, I don't mean having some Gantt chart.
Yeah. I mean, one of the demos for Devon, and I know, I think there was some controversy about the demos afterwards. So, you know, but I didn't.
They were sped up.
I didn't
think.
look at that.
Yeah.
But one of the demos was showing something where it made a plan where it was actually putting log statements into the program and then running them on the terminal, looking at the output from the terminal, and then making quote unquote decisions about how to continue, which would be kind of like what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
This clip was taken from my podcast, The Engineering Room with Dave Farley, a monthly podcast with some of the brightest minds in software engineering. You can find full episodes on all your favourite podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Your support helps us to bring you these regular episodes, so please leave your positive review on your preferred podcast platform to help us to continue to grow and bring you great guests and their insights. Thank you very much for listening.